This is the first part of our lesson on incorporating quotations, and it's a little more strategic. I'm not merely talking about punctuation, but I'm talking about how to make use of another text for your argument, particularly with regard to literary analysis. Have a pen and paper handy so that you can write down important points. Because I'm going to be reading some longer quotations here, you'll need to be able to see them, and with this video, you're not going to be able to do that unless you view this video in full screen. Here are the basic do's and don'ts of quoting. It all has to do with the purpose for which you're quoting. Your paper develops an argument about what the author of a text is doing whenever you write literary analysis. It's about how the text works. So you need to use quotations to support your argument. That is, you need to select, present, and discuss material from the text specifically to prove what it is that you think is going on, making your case. Quoting for any other purpose is counterproductive. There are three big don'ts. Don't quote to tell the story or otherwise convey basic information about the text. Assume that the reader has a working familiarity with the text and summarize only as necessary. Do not quote just for the sake of quoting or just to fill up space. This is a huge one. Also, don't use two quotations in a row without intervening material of your own. I'm going to read aloud a paragraph from an analysis of Virginia Woolf's novel To the Lighthouse. Right now, just absorb the information, and I'll highlight what we need to pay attention to later. We learn about Mrs. Ramsay's personality by observing her feelings about other characters. For example, Mrs. Ramsay has mixed feelings towards Mr. Tansley, but her feelings seem to grow more positive over time as she comes to know him better. At first, Mrs. Ramsay finds Mr. Tansley annoying, as shown especially when he mentions that no one is going to the lighthouse. But rather than hating him, at this point she feels pity. Quote, "She pitied men always as if they lacked something," unquote. Then later, during the gathering, pity turns to empathy as she realizes that Mr. Tansley must feel inferior. He must know, Mrs. Ramsay thinks, that, quote, "no woman would look at him with Paul Rayleigh in the room," unquote. Finally, by the end of the dinner scene, she feels some attraction to Mr. Tansley and also a new respect. Quote, "She liked his laugh. She liked his awkwardness. There was a lot in that man after all," unquote. In observing this evolution in her attitude, we learn more about Mrs. Ramsay than we do about Mr. Tansley. The change in Mrs. Ramsay's attitude is not used by Woolf to show that Mrs. Ramsay is fickle or confused. Rather, it is used to show her capacity for understanding both the frailty and complexity of human beings. This is a central characteristic of Mrs. Ramsay's personality. Notice that this paragraph includes three basic kinds of material. First, it includes statements expressing the writer's own ideas about the relationship that Woolf is creating, and this is at the beginning. The second kind of information in the paragraph is data or evidence from the text in either summarized, paraphrased, or quoted form. Finally, the paragraph ends with a discussion of how the data that was just quoted, that is, the quoted evidence, supports the writer's interpretation. This is an explanation of the nature of those quotations. These quotations are used in accordance with the writer's purpose. That is, they try to develop a claim about Mrs. Ramsay's feelings and how those feelings changed and what those feelings indicate about her personality. In a literary analysis, any time that you're making use of evidence in summarized, paraphrased, or quoted form, you absolutely need to put your spin on it. That's what's important. Quotations are like suitcases. They need to be unpacked. The main problem with quotation arises when writers assume that quotations speak for themselves. Because the meaning of a quotation is obvious to them, many writers assume that its meaning will be obvious to the readers when often it is not. In literary analysis, when it comes to presenting textual data, evidence, quoting isn't the only way to go. You can use other modes of presentation, including just referring to textual data, summarizing, and paraphrasing. You will often want merely to refer or point to passages that contribute to your argument. In other cases, you'll want to paraphrase, here I mean translate, the original into your own words instead of quoting it. Summarize and paraphrase when it's not so much the language of the text that justifies your position, but its substance or content. This is a really important distinction. To paraphrase means to express someone else's ideas in your own language. This doesn't mean just changing one or two words. It means the sentence structure should be your own, in addition to the words. To summarize means to distill only the most essential points of someone else's work. You can summarize a novel's plot or the upshot of a particular scene. You paraphrase particular ideas. You paraphrase sentences, parts of the text. But again, this is different than quoting them. You're putting them into your own language. Whenever you paraphrase, you have to remember 2 points. First, you have to provide a page reference for where you're getting the text. Second, the paraphrase must be entirely in your own words. You must do more than merely substitute a phrase here and there. You must completely alter the sentence structure. Summary moves much further away from the point-by-point translation than does paraphrase. When you summarize a passage, you need first to absorb its meaning, and then capture in your own words the most important elements from the original passage. A summary is necessarily shorter than a paraphrase. As I said before, you want to summarize or paraphrase when the language of the text doesn't really matter to your point. All you're trying to make reference to is some plot point or development. You quote only when you need to make use of the language. After you've decided that you do want to use material in quoted form, quote only the portions of the text that specifically are relevant to your point. Think of the literary text that you're working with in terms of units, words, phrases, sentences, and groups of sentences in the form of paragraphs or stanzas, and use only the units that you need. If it is the particular words or phrases that prove your point, you do not need to quote the entire sentences in which they appear. Rather, incorporate the words and phrases of the sentence to express your own ideas. Okay, this is the big picture of quotation. We're going to deal with more specific strategies for quotation in the second half of this lesson.